Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Soul Blind Ministries, the Book of Secrets. We're going to go ahead and reveal the day 3. I don't know if you can see it up there. Day 3 of the Book of Secrets. Each one of these days, if you remember from our lessons so far, that the days represent steps or stages, periods of your development. And so when we're reading the Book of Secrets, we're reading the Bible, same Bible we already have, all of us already know, familiar with very well. But at this particular point, it becomes God used the real people and their lives and the language that it was written in to write, I'm guessing, to future generations, because I've never seen anything in history where it talks about this book being easily seen by anybody else. So I'm assuming it's made for now. So we can start seeing how the people of the Bible become ideas or beliefs, and the world being you, and that you are now starting to gather from your basic understanding to create enlightenment. So basically, simple recap that you are the world. The world is broken into 3 different attributes of yourself: the lower self, the middle self, and then the higher self: mind, spirit, and body. And the waters that are divided in between are a reflective medium that helps the higher and lower self reflect within each other, so that the lower self, which we know in modern days as the id, can elevate or build up to create a bridge between the higher self and the lower self, so that the new Jerusalem, the new peace, may create wholeness, because that's what shalom or peace means. It doesn't just mean peace, love. It means actual to be whole, to be complete. So we're trying to create completion within ourselves. And so we're going to go ahead and try to use day 3 as kind of part of that building process. In fact, this is about, on this day, we gather the waters and the land together. Now, in the original Hebrew, the symbols used to be numbers, and so the first symbol was that of an ox. The second symbol was that of a tent. It was like a spiral, and the tent was kind of looped around into itself. And in between, it was like there was the entrance to where the man enters his tent, and then where the woman has her part of the tent. And so it represents that inner self where things unite. And then of course the ox represents that of experience. And then so it's 1 and 2, and then 3 comes from it's a symbol of a foot, and it represents to seek and gather, not to seek, but rather to gather together. And so we are now on the 3rd day, which is about gathering things together. Now, if you consider it too as being mind, spirit, and body, you have the mind represents the father who dictates what needs to be done, the mother who regulates and reflects back within the household between the father and the child how to keep balance between them, and then the child does the action, because in Hebrew the word for son is ben, which comes from the word banan, which means to build. So the child builds the house. And so the mind leads, the heart reflects, and the body does the actions. So at this particular point, we need to gather the waters and the earth. Now, from the earth, the important part about earth particularly is that it is the lower self at this particular point on the inner world. So within the inner world, we need to build that up. And so it means your understanding is very primitive at this particular point, and it needs to find elevation, and thus through finding elevation, it creates the bridge between to God, or to the higher self in this case, because you are the master of your inner world, and because you're the master of the inner world, you are creating a reflection of the real God on the outside. Okay, so at this point, we have to consider Adam. Now, in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, it talks about how God formed Adam from the dust, from the clay of the earth. Okay, so now everything that you're going to learn in the Bible here is about gaining things from the earth. You're going to either gather stones and build up a house, or you're going to grow a tree, or you're going to find gems. Like the parables talk about, that the kingdom of heaven is like finding treasure in a field. And so a field is a level state of being. It is a flat or open level state of being, right? And so if you're going to gather your understanding, you're going to gather your ideals together. So imagine where John the Baptist is out baptizing, and he says that, you think that you have sons of Abraham, but I tell you, I can did your sons of Abraham, but I can go ahead and raise up sons of Abraham from these stones. The stones technically are still people. They're still beliefs. These are generally an unrefined belief. And through a refining process, like when they're chiseling the stones for the temple, it means to refine. And so these stones are being refined, and then they're being built up. Thus, the children build up. Right? It's a progenitive lineage of truth that we're working with. So we're building our truth. And so also when it talks about finding treasure in the field, it means treasure is being truth. True riches are truth. And so we're going to gather those from the field. You gather the metals come from the field, the plants come from the field, everything comes from the field, everything comes from the earth. But it starts with one person coming from the earth, and that's Adam. Adam, technically the word Adam has kind of a few definitions to it. It means man, and it doesn't just refer to a male. Gender has absolutely nothing to do with it. Adam actually, there's a verse in the book of Numbers that talks about it, referring just to women also. So it is just mankind. Gender on the Book of Secrets is really telling you about attributes, not about gender. And so masculine and feminine attributes. And so we are looking at the building up of your understanding by taking up these stones. You build a house. Or if you took all this earth and gathered it together, you would build a mountain. Because if, say, you had, just like a kingdom, we looked at kingdoms, that if you have a person, say a man is a belief, if you have many beliefs, you gather together, they create a state of consciousness or a state of being. And in this state of being, it is ruled by a primary ideal. The primary ideal represents a king, and if you were to overthrow that kingdom, you would overthrow the king, and thus making you the master of that state of being. And so you have many states of being that you must master, and so in this case we're trying to overcome the world kingdoms and have dominion, making us a reflection of Christ, Lord of Lords, Kings of Kings. And so you will be the ruler or master of your inner world. All right, so we are building up, and when you build up some higher elevation, you're taking, just like stones or just like people, you're gathering your stones and building them up. And if you look in the book of Revelations, it talks about they were having the mountains fall upon them. It talks, then it says that like the kings, the mighty, the powerful, and it goes down to the list, and at the bottom is the servants. And this is a caste system. You might also recognize it as a pyramid. A pyramid is a caste system that is like such, and with the king on the top and the servants at the bottom. The servants support the king, right? And so this becomes then a mountain. And so this becomes an understanding that is gathering your understandings to a higher elevation. So whenever it talks about in the Bible about a mountain or mountaineer, it means to ascend to a higher truth. Whenever it talks about a tower, that's doing the same thing. It's talking about gaining a higher perspective, a higher understanding. And in fact, the name Magdalene, Mary, almost every single name, except for maybe two in the book of the Gospels, the four Gospels, is either Martha, Mary, or Miriam. And these names all mean rebellion. Rebellion represents change. And so you are changing the way things were. And in this particular case, if you had Mary Magdalene, her name means change, and her name also, Magdalene, means like a watchtower. And so basically it is a higher perception that is watching over the other state of being. And so it is, her name then becomes a change in perception, or basically to change your perception to a higher state. And start seeing this follows through all over in the Bible. But for now, we're going to take a look at the earth, and then from the earth it comes Adam. And so The word we're still using for God is going to be Elohim, or Elohim, however you say it. It is comes from the word plurality of judges or rulers. Remember, many rulers of this kingdoms. And so this higher understanding is what God, this particular moment, means, higher discernment. And so higher discernment creates Adam from the earth. Now, there's a Hebrew word, or technically I guess it's Yiddish, it is golem. And I'm not talking about Lord of the Rings golem, I'm talking about a golem is an automaton or a creature made of dirt. And this is a big thing throughout the Hebrew religion, is having the golem, and that the golem is without understanding, the golem is primitive. And so, but you're building of the earth. In fact, Adam's name is red, and the word for earth is Adama. Adama means red earth. And so the red of the earth, the clay of the earth, is being assembled and being built up. And this is how you are taking yourself from the things you already know. Now, you notice in the book of James, it talks about things that are corruptible. The original man is corruptible, but the second Adam is incorruptible. The things terrestrial, earth, versus celestial, heaven. And so we're taking your basic self and creating the higher self. And so the first Adam, the first idea is that of flesh, that of basic truths, and he's becoming a celestial being, or an enlightened being. So we're trying to gain elevation in this. So we're taking the golem, and it's funny too, because most people think, oh, we're not a golem, we're made in God's image. The truth is, if we're going to go ahead and take a peek over at, I'm going to go ahead and share one of my screens real quick. In fact, let's go to the Blue Letter Bible. I like to go to the Blue Letter Bible quite a bit, as you guys all know. Give me a second to bring that up. And this is not the screen I want. Let's see. Share screen. And come on, let me share the screen. All right, Blue Letter Bible, here we go. All right, so we're gonna go into Genesis chapter 2. So Gen 2, blueletterbible.org, that's my favorite tool. And let's go ahead and take a look at verses, we'll say 4 through 9, and Genesis 2:4. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now look at the word we have generations, the generations of the heaven and the earth. We are talking about a genealogy of truth, that each person is a belief, and each belief is building up to create this reflection of heaven and earth. And in the sixth day of creation, you'll look and it'll say that let us make man in our image. But we are back on the third day, or possibly sooner, and it says, and every plant of the field before was in the earth, and every herb of the field grew, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. There was not a man to till the ground, because there was no man yet, right? But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils, and nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. Now the word soul is going to turn on Strong's here. Strong's is the original translation. And let's see, soul. Go ahead and look at soul. And soul, life, creature, preserve, appetite, mind is the main thing we're trying to look at here, because this is about your mind becoming aware. This is awareness that is coming to your mind. The word breath is usually what you get a lot of times, but it means technically, you'll look in Greek, and the Greek word will have psyche per soul, and psyche means means the mind itself. So it's an attribute we often look past. So he became a living mind, or an active conscious thought. So at this particular point we have, there was no one till the ground, and but went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now, breath, technically, like say if we said Abraham or Sarah, Originally the name was Abram or Sari. But by putting the ha on there, it means to infuse with the Spirit, and thus, therefore, becoming infused with a living consciousness. And so he's now become uninfused with a living consciousness. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Oops, did I skip something? Yeah. So basically, if you notice there that it says that man was formed before the trees. So before the trees came man. So technically, this is still the third day, because the third day, you'll notice, is when the trees were formed. And if you'll see back here in Genesis 1, verse 12, and the earth was brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So trees are not formed until the fourth day, but on the third day, technically, is when man is created, but not until the sixth day does God create man to be in his likeness, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea. So God is making man in his image afterwards, not in the beginning. So we start off as a golem. Now, the whole Bible, even though we get to the back in chapter 2, you'll see that it has when it had the seventh day, and thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work that he had created and made. Right? But it says, but these are the generations. And so basically this goes back by this point, and it shows you the process. Now, we actually haven't reached the seventh day yet. People think that it was after the seventh day was when life basically began, but it's not. We are still in a process. This is a 7-step process to create enlightenment. And so you are trying to emulate God, that you may find a way to find peace or rest within yourself. But you have not reached that day yet. In fact, you haven't reached day 6 yet, because you have not found what it takes to get to this point. When you reach the 6th day, you will be a reflection of God, and then you will have peace, which is the 7th day. So we are still way back here in the process of the heavens and the earth being created. Though you'll see that there's the sun and moon and stars, consider for the fact that you have daylight before you have the sun, which happens on the 4th day. So perhaps maybe there's something that we've been missing all along and not quite catching the full grasp of it, by thinking that the sun, the moon, and the stars came before, or sorry, after man and trees and everything else, that the sun, which gives the day light and creates a day because it's night and darkness, and there wouldn't have been night and darkness without the sun. So this is actually an illumination process that that is being generated. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this window for now. We'll go ahead and look at our screen for today's lesson, where you guys are at right now. I'm going to go to the same screen you're at. Let's see, where are we? Why am I not seeing that? Okay. I'm going to share my screen, and oops, come on, you can do this. And where are you? There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just run our lesson today off of this particular screen, because I think it's a little bit easier this way. So if I hit play there, I'd see myself and be in that infinite loop going further and further away. All right, so again, today's lesson is Genesis 1:9, and God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let dry land appear," and it was so. The translations for this are going to get a little more varied than what we normally see, because this particular time it's not well, let's look at the way the translations work. You'll see that there are extra words. There's only one number that ends up after each one of these words, all right? Now, each one of these words is a translation of a single word, okay, in Hebrew. But you'll see that some of them have things like, and it was so, but there is no translation that goes with it because there was no further translation to be found because these are words that are added in to make it flow nicer. Also, like here, it says land appear, but it doesn't actually have the word land. Land was added to it to make the thing flow a little nicer. In fact, most of the Bible is written like this, where it has the basic premise of the words and what they mean, and then they'll add, as for this has happened, or they'll add a lot of different extra words in there so that it reads easier in English. But remember, the Bible is two books, at least two books happening simultaneously. There is the stories of the creation process happening here, but there's also the truth about creating truth within yourself. And so depending on your perspective, the view in which you use to view this alters drastically what it is that you're seeing. And so then the words themselves change drastically too. Now look at right here where it says in the beginning, and God created is the multiple judges, the plurality of judge or king. And we can go ahead and click on this link. I recommend you don't click on the link if you're watching me, because then I will disappear and you won't be able to catch it from this point, and you'll have to kind of rewind it all back again. So what I recommend is that you can just watch my screen for now, and I think that'll probably get you where you need to go. If you're watching this on through video, you can go ahead and right click on each one of those links and it'll take you here. It's just open in a new window or a new tab, and then you can play the other video in the background. Anyhow, so again, God at this particular point is Elohim, which is a plurality of judges. Okay, so this is, I like to call it discernment because it is a plurality of judgment. I don't want to use judgment per se, because if I just say judgment, a lot of people will confuse judgment with being, to be judgmental. And we're not trying to be judgmental. We're just trying to create truth and understanding within us. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what we have. And it says, and so the word said means to avow, declare, pledge, or make known. We've done this one before. Let the waters actually end up being like a transitional truth, right? And so because the waters are between the higher and lower self, the earth and the heavens, they are the reflective medium in between, all right? So within a transitional truth. Under the heaven. Now it doesn't say actually under the heaven, it just says heaven. So the Bible actually says God makes known transitional truth, higher understanding. Basically, the heaven represents the sky, and the sky represents the higher understanding because it is means to be lofty. And so these two are in opposition. So we are now, loftiness is the balancing point in between. So the higher understanding. So basically, the translation starts changing because of these words. It doesn't say under just got added because it makes more sense to type the waters under and gather them together. And be gathered together really just says to gather. It means to wait, to look for, to hope, expect, or to bind or collect. And we can go ahead and look at that ourselves. We want to go in here and I'll click on it, and you see it says to wait, look for, hope, expect, or to bind and collect together. So it's not something you would think to have collect and bind together, because this is a translation they actually used because it's talking about gathering the waters together, but it's not. It's actually meaning to like just to wait for it, or expectations, to hope for something, and to see it and to hope for this thing to happen. So it's not just necessarily about just gathering, but it's about inspecting, so to speak, as well. All right, and so unto basically is just a form of motion, to or towards, and then one. The word one is interesting. We'll go ahead and look at that. And the word one can also mean one, but it also comes from a root of meaning to go one way or another, or to be sharp. Basically, if you look at the root of these things in the lexicon, it'll tell you that it means to unite or join oneself together, to collect oneself. It's basically unity, by creating a union or unity. So basically, one is not necessarily just the number one, but it's about a singularity, but a singularity of gathering together into one singularity. So we are uniting or joining or collecting, and it creates a keenness or sharpness, and so this is creating a sharpness or a clarity of understanding. And place, and it says to bring it to one place, and place just means basically a region or place or a station, office. It pretty much just means place. But now the one that gets me is it says, and let the dry. The dry, technically it's just one word, means to be dry, but it may possibly have to do with clarification. Now, it actually comes from some, and we'll look at that here in a second, but I want to go in here first. And so it says dry land or dry ground, right? So let the dry ground appear. That which is dry, to be dry-footed, right? But we're going to go, it comes in, so it comes in from yabesh, which is to make dry, wither, dry, become dry, dried up, or withered. But it can also have to do with to put to shame, to be ashamed, to be put to shame, made to blush. Basically, you put something to shame because you are exposing it for what it is. So to dry it up means to take away the wetness, to take away whatever, we'll say, because water is kind of spirit. So if we were taking away the spirit, we are creating clarity. And so, like, we'll take a look at the word Zion, because remember, God's holy mountain is Zion, and it has a very similar meaning as dry, and also has a similar meaning as desert. So I went to type in the word Zion, and we're going to go ahead and turn on the strong so we can see the definition. And under Zion, and this is God's holy city, is the same as the city of David. The city of David means love, but this is parched place, right? And so it's a sunny place, a parched place. But when we go to the sunny places, drying things up, and it says the same as a signpost, a monument, or a market. So by making something dried up, it means it's easy to see. There's nothing to obscure you. There are no clouds. That this has become easy to see, from the same sense, in the sense of conspicuousness. And if you look at what it says, because it dryness, drought, or desert, from unused root meaning to be parched. So because we create clarity by removing that what obscures our view. And it also comes from the meaning to excel, be bright, or preeminent, to be perpetual, or overseer, or be enduring. Enduring. So basically, it's about creating this perpetual state of enlightenment. But unfortunately, because we are trying to create clarity, we are also creating a little bit of a disconnect, because we are viewing the ground in this particular case. I'm going to go back one more, and we should be back to where we started. One more after this. Okay, so let's see. I have to navigate it this way so you guys can see everything that I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to come back down, and you'll see that the first one, again, it said, and God said, let the waters be under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. But it's going to be a little different now that we've seen these pieces come together. And so, and then it says to have land appear. And but the word doesn't actually have land. Land's not actually in there. It just says appear. To have dry appear. And so the word appear comes from the word to inspect, perceive, or consider. And then there is no and it was so. That was just added to kind of create kind of a poetic flow to things. All right. So if we made a translation of this, oh, this is saying not working. Here it goes. All right. And come on down. Hopefully this will update here in a second. I don't know why it's having a little bit of technical difficulty. And will you draw for me? No? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this window and reopen it and see if this works better. Oh, there, now it decides it wants to start as soon as I hit the refresh button. All right. So let's go ahead and try to scroll back down. Hopefully it won't cause that same glitch again. And all right. And so when we look through these pieces as they flow together, the translation comes out considerably different. And it says, and discernment of judgment, and we had discernment of judgment being God, makes known that the transitional truth of higher understanding, oh, come on. It does not like me right now. All right. And discretion of judgment makes known that the transitional truth, because of waters, of the higher understanding collects towards a unified position so that the basic understanding can be considered. Now, it sounds a little odd from what it was, but we're taking God, higher judgment, declares or makes known, waters, transitional truth, higher understanding, so those truth of the higher understanding basically collects or gathers towards unity in a place of clarity or exposing and perception, so, or to consider. So then if you take that same translation and write it in a little bit easier to follow, the discerning mind knows that higher understanding is only seen clearly through reflecting in the unification of the lower self, because the lower self is the world. So when the earth is gathered together, then we are reflecting in the lower self, unifying being one, reflecting being the waters, that we are looking within to the waters, and through this process you are seeing understanding. So the discerning mind knows that higher understanding is seen clearly through reflecting in the unification of the lower self. So basically, gathering together your basic truths creates a reflection of truth. By looking at these, remember we're saying we're trying to create like a mountain or a tower or house, whatever else. We're building these things up, and by gathering these things together and reflecting within them, looking into the primitive understanding you have, you then gain higher understanding. So that's where clarity comes from. Also, if you consider that, what was I going to say? I was going somewhere with this. That'll come back to me in a second. Anyhow, so we have, let's go ahead and look on to the next verse well, it doesn't want to draw on me for some reason. Let's see, come on, you can draw, you can do it. I can't even select my page right now for some reason. There we go. No. Perhaps I'll have to restart this page yet again. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and cancel sharing for a moment while I bring this back up. Come on, Google. All right, so hopefully we're still recording. I can't tell. It looks like it's working fine over here, but it is causing some weird delays. All right, so our next verse that we're going to be working with is verse 10, and 10 is also equally a little different in the translation versus what you might have originally thought it as. And I'm going to go ahead and try and share it again, see if this is working this time. And let's go back here, share screen. All right, and so the particular verse, oh, I did it again. All right. So verse 10, it says, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathered together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. Now, again, we have the same name for God, judgment, plural judgments. So discernment of judgment, makes known, called, proclaim, make known, dry, that same thing, to make that kind of clarity or to expose the basic self, to make shameful. Land or earth, so primitive understanding. So judgment makes known, that exposing of the primitive understanding, and the ground gathered together. Oh, sorry, and the gathering together. So collected mass, ground, hope, wait, look for, expect. We went through that one before. Of the waters, transitional truth, proclaims or makes known, see. Now the word see, see comes from the word meaning to basically to boil or froth over. It can be used, seas can be used for lakes, it can be used for rivers, any great body of water. In fact, that's why when you have, the Bible talks about those that have overcome the tribulation have walked upon a lake or a sea of like a mirror. And so basically this is a calming effect, as we learned in day 2, that the waters, once they're calm, become thus a reflection point. All right, so we are, go ahead and look at the verse for seas and the translation. It doesn't say he sees, it just says seas. All right, and seas come out to being from an unused root meaning to roar. Okay, so this is an unsettled, uneasy spirit. This is your basic spirit. It is it's kind of like the waters above are pure truth, but the waters below are what would we call it? Like a bitterness, and of the bitterness of the lower self, you are gathering together from this understanding beneath there. All right, so we're taking from the seas, and the sea basically, so it's going to represent a unsettled spirit, and so we're trying to create a calmness within your spirit by calming the roaring and foaming and frothing that is happening within. And by doing so, then you create clarity. And so where we're at right now is that God has gathered together the land. He's gathering the waters. He calls them seas. And so basically we're taking, you have the higher truth and the lower truth, and so you're gathering the consciousness of the lower and the higher truth together to gain understanding. And again, we use the word of God, which is the multiple judges, so judgment or discernment. To inspect, the word saw means to inspect, perceive, or consider, and then it says it is good, and it means that this is of a right understanding or a good understanding. And so when we look at that one together, it kind of comes out a little bit different yet again from what we had. It says, and the discernment of judgment also makes known, I just put also in there so it makes it easier, also makes known that to expose primitive understanding, you must gather and consider the transitional truth called the lack of understanding of an unsettled spirit, and discernment and judgment considers this to be of a good understanding. And it looks like my Internet Explorer might have done something silly here. Am I still online? I think I am. And let's see. Okay, so I'm still, I look like I'm still broadcasting. I saw the page died out on me, and I wasn't sure if it had died yet or not. And so we're gonna go ahead and come back and look down at the bottom and see what that translation comes out to being. And then the final translation, at least in a very summarized version, it says, the discerning mind, that's the same judgment, I just made it discerning mind instead, also recognizes, means make known, that clarity, that's the dryness, comes, and I kind of changed the order so it reads a little bit easier, comes from collectively gathering and looking within the obscurity, so gathering the basic self, and then perceiving of the lower waters or the sea, the frothing consciousness, and this is true or truth. And so basically, we'll read these two together again. It says, the discerning mind knows that higher understanding is only seen clearly through reflecting in the unification of the lower self. The discerning mind also recognizes that clarity comes from collectively gathering and looking within the obscurity of the lower consciousness for this is truth. I could just say, and this is so, or this is of a good understanding if you want, but it's easier to say that this is truth because this is true, and this is what truth comes from. And so the obscurity that is referring to at this particular point, because when it talks about the seas, not only is it talking about that frothing and foaming and whatever else, it is also in Hebrew it talks about that the waters represent a state of not being able to see clearly, that because, and I guess because the waters are uneasy, that you don't see clearly, but also comes out to being like a cloudy region, and that obscures your perception, and so thus we take away the clouds and it creates that clarity. So in this particular point, if you're looking within the obscurity of the lower consciousness, it means that you're looking into the shadows or the darkest parts of you to gather from the darkest parts of you, and we're going to create consciousness of it. Now remember that this has all been about a process of gathering understanding or gathering truth. And so because you are gathering truth, you need to take the you're trying to create clarity within yourself, and if every person is a thought or belief, then we need to take the thoughts or belief and create enlightenment. So in this particular case, if you were as, say, a fish, and a fish is in the sea, then you are, these are ideals that are lost within your lower consciousness, and that you must bring them out of the abyss, out of the darkness, and bring them up into the light. Thus you would make fishers of men, gathering your consciousness that it may be enlightened and brought to the surface. Not only are you bringing salvation to others as the real world, but you are also taking salvation, which is of the mind, and bringing it up through gathering consciousness up into enlightenment. And that will actually see how that works in the fifth day. So we're harvesting from the inner world and creating true higher understanding through this process. So small recap that we have as a family: mind, spirit, and body. And these three things are working in unison, that they are creating this mirrored bridge. And through that, you're going to build your understanding. And again, so imagine you have a house, and the house is made of many stones. All these stones are thoughts or beliefs that you have. These stones that you built your house on are generally given to you by people you've known. So these thoughts and beliefs have voices. These voices are very noisy. Noise, we'll say, to water makes the water uneasy. Vibrations create chaos, so the water roars, and then there's instability within you. And so you are building a house out of these stones, and because the child builds, and so you're taking all these childish thoughts and building them together and creating a house. And in this house is I call it a haunted house because it's noisy and it's filled with ghosts of your past. And that's what this whole thing of heaven and earth, you're going with what is before and what is in the future. And so because you have what is before and in the future, you are constantly not in the now. In fact, even though I'm talking to you, you're probably remembering different verses and different things, and so you're not existing in the exact moment, and it's hard to exist in the moment. And this future and past self, remember, the very first day of creation was the heaven and the earth were in the mind. And so basically the higher self and the lower self, that which you, the lofty and the firm, that is who I think I am, that is who other people think I am, but who I really am is where the problem is, and we're not in the now. We're not in who we really are. We don't not see who we really are. And so we are obviously in a state of turmoil, and our waters are imbalanced. And then when the Bible talks about building a house, when you're building a house, that a house built on sand, that is not built on a foundation. There is no solid stone. There is no founding truth in which to build upon. That's Christ is the cornerstone, the squared center, the foundation, the flat plane in which we build all our truths centered upon. And so he is the center of truth. And in fact, his name represents truth himself. So he is the embodiment of truth that we are trying to create. But we cannot create truth if we are building on sand. It means we're building on unstable, inconsequential dirt. We're building on foundations that we have from before, and you cannot build on what you knew before, because what you knew before was wrong. And so because when the winds blow, when the wind comes from the higher self versus the waters at the bottom in your lower spirit come at odds, then the house falls. Because when the house divided cannot stand, it means when your soul, the understanding of your soul is divided against itself, it cannot stand. There's no structure that can hold it together. And so it's like, imagine you're building a house, and say you're building it on a foundation, saying like beauty. We'll say beauty. Beauty is a big factor. A lot of people go by today. You have to be the most beautiful person, because beautiful people, and you have all this stack of ideas that you built up on top of it, saying like, oh, beautiful people get the best places, people get treated differently, beautiful people get this. And so you're stacking up this part of your house, and it's built on this foundation of beauty. And then what happens is you get older, or you feel that you're less beautiful, your whole world starts falling apart and everything starts crumbling around you. And so what you try to do is you're trying to reinforce truths that cannot be held together. These truths, these stones are crumbling and they cannot hold. And so you're reinforcing them with lies, and I'm throwing more lies and more lies to keep this together. And unfortunately, your house is now just made of these faulty lies that are lying to you. And that's the essence of where you get demons in the house that the last state of the person is worse than before. It's because you've allowed falseness to inhabit your inner world. In fact, another way you can think of it is the story of vampires. Vampires are not in the Bible, but the truths of a vampire are in there. And you just say that, why can't a vampire come into your home unless you invite it in? And that's basically, it's the same truth, that the house is the soul, and that I cannot have impurity or evil enter my home unless I have invited it in or allowed it to be in. So if you don't invite evil to be a part of you, it can't be a part of you. And that's I guess it might help you understand when you see like the vampire stories, why they can't come in unless you invite them, and they'll stay outside, is because impurity cannot exist within you unless you allow it in. Also because I don't understand how I never understood the concept of possession. A lot of possessed spirits, I know people believe in this very emphatically, but most of the time you'll see that this happens in generally third world countries, or people in places where people believe very heavily in these impure spirits taking them over. But the reality is, all of us have demons within us. All of us have adversity. All of us have oppositions that we create within ourselves. And a lot of times these are lies that we tell ourselves, because these truths, these noisy truths that are all calling out with all their own voices as loud as they can, pay attention to us, are creating our judgment. They're creating the things that we believe in, the things that we follow, the things that we stand for, and the things that we fall for. And if we have a house built of all these lies, all these false truths, all these inconsistent, unconsequential truths we've built our entire life on, then we are filled with the haunted house of ignorance. And so it's like having, imagine you have a house and you've lived there for years, and you come home and the power is out this time, the light's gone out, and so it's darkness is reigning within your house. And in fact, there's a verse in the Bible that says, if they're the light, the eyes are the window to the soul, so to speak, or the light to the soul, lamps to the soul. And so basically, that what you perceive enlightens your inside. But if that light is darkness, then how dark is it? And so basically, imagine the light has gone out inside your house, and you're walking around, and and you know where all your furniture is in your house. But then all of a sudden you trip over something, and you can't figure out why did I trip? That doesn't make any sense. I shouldn't be tripping. My life should be going just a certain way. Everything should be laid out a certain way, but yet I tripped. And it sets you off a little bit, and you're now a little cautious about it. And so you're going along a little further, and then all of a sudden you're in another room and you trip again, and not in the same place, but you tripped again, and you can't figure out, why did I trip? And so it starts creating a little bit of a, more fear starts building up inside you, because you don't know why you're tripping up. Things should be a certain way. And over you trip up in the house in different places, and you can't figure out what it is that's causing this. And so now you have developed this sense of fear within you, and you don't know where to go or what to do. And so you're now calling these demons are now tripping me up. But if you can take that demon, whatever that demon is that possesses your house, and bring it into the light, if the lights came on in that house and you saw that it was just your pet turtle had gotten out of his cage, and maybe the cage had broken due to an earthquake, who knows, but there's a turtle walking around your house, you're tripping over it, it's scared to death, it's running all over the place, and you just keep tripping over it over and over again. So when you feel for it, it's gone, because it's run away. And so that's the same concept, is that when you can name a demon, that's why in the Bible stories, but in the stories, when a demon is given a name, it loses its power. It's because that you can recognize what it is in the light. In truth, I can see what it is that haunts me. And when I know what it is, I know how to address what it is. Oh, I didn't get that promotion, not because other people or whatever I want to make up excuses for. The fact is, maybe I'm getting older, or maybe I'm not as smart as I was, or thought I was, and maybe I'm not as beautiful as I thought I was, or maybe things just happen. And so we start blaming other things for non-reality. And so a lot of times these become our inner demons. These become the things that haunt us over and over again. In fact, if you consider Paul had his own thorn in his side, and you'll see in the Bible that thorns represent an attribute of sin, and that Paul had a thorn in his side, and Paul's name used to be Saul. Saul means desire, but Saul, desire, saw the light, illumination came to him, truth came to him, and he had his eyes, I mean perception became blinded, that I do not see as clearly as I thought I did. But he had scales came from his eyes, because remember, we're talking about the lower waters, those of the fish, those that are in the obscurity without enlightenment. And so the scales came off of his eyes, because nobody I've ever known has gotten scales in their eyes. I've had crusty eyes, had them this morning, but it represents scales and that of the fish being removed from your perception, that I may see clearly. And in this clarity, I may then know. And so he has, Saul then becomes Paul. Paul means to become small. I was great in my own vision, and he was hunting and persecuting the early the Hebrews. And so and also then to the Christians, as would have been if they were at that time, but the followers of Christ. And because he was persecuting them, he now understands that he has now become small. That means he's become humble. So I've gone from pride to humbleness. But he says that that he has a thorn in his side, and that if he didn't have it, that basically his pride would be out of check. And so his thorn is pride, and he remembers his nature to be prideful, and so he uses that as a reminder in which to be humble. We can look at that at another date, but that's the basic sense behind it. So right now we are all dealing with a sense of confusion and chaos, and we must look within ourselves to unlock that confusion and chaos. But there is encouragement, at least to know that I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I can share another page before we wrap this up. And we're going to go ahead and go into the New Testament, and I'm going to go into the book of John. Let's go to the Blue Letter Bible again, and we'll go to John chapter 1. John. And I'm really horrible at remembering where things are at. World. I know the gist of where they are, and I know the definitions of how they work, but a lot of times I have trouble finding the exact. Oh, I was in John. How did I get out of here? Let's go back. John chapter 1, and edit. Find on this page. World. All right. So, and remember when we talked about, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Strongs here, is John 1:10, made it a little easier to find that way. All right, so, and he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. Now, remember, Christ represents truth. He is the light of the world, right? He is the true light, as it said in verse 9, that was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Now imagine each man representing a thought or belief. So we are illuminating the true light, truth, which illuminates every belief that comes into the world. The word we're using for world again represents the cosmos. Cosmos means the order of things. And so in the order of things, it says, he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. So what this means is that, let's go ahead and stop sharing. So that there is an order within yourself, and truth illuminates all the thoughts and beliefs within you. But the world, your inner world, your order of yourself, does not recognize the illumination. But it means that the truth is within you, that he is within the world. In other words, the truth is within the world, but you don't recognize it yet. Because we are creating from the corruptible into the incorruptible, from the filth of the earth, the lower self, the basic self. From the basic self, you are gaining, you're building up that enlightenment, but basically it's like to grow a tree, and we'll look at this again on the next episode, that you're going to take from that which is corruptible, that all the information that you've been given this whole time will then become a process of growth that brings about enlightenment, and that becomes transitional and becomes incorruptible, from the corruptible, the filth, like a tree or a plant. You plant it into manure, that which is corruptible, the garbage you've lived in your whole life. You plant a seed of possibility and hope, and it creates a lineage that will create that which is incorruptible, that which is pure, that which is true, and that which will bear fruit, that we may eat of and partake of the living truth, which is Christ. Anyhow, hopefully this made enough sense. If anybody has questions, please feel free to go ahead and leave comments below. If you would like, you're welcome to become part of these discussions, or you can leave comments and we can go ahead and read those on the air. Anyhow, that's the first part of day 3. We just did verses 9 and 10, and next time we'll finish up day 3. Hopefully that makes sense. And thank you, and God bless.